My family treated me like the help. My brother's girlfriend knew the truth. My name is Thea Calloway. I'm 29 years old. I have a doctorate in pediatric physical therapy. And last Saturday, I drove 4 hours from Richmond, Virginia to my dad's house in Charlottesville, only to be handed a stack of china plates before I even got my shoes off. "Claire's coming tonight," my dad said, not looking up from the counter where he was arranging craft beers like they were trophies at the state championship. "Don't ruin this for us." Not hello, not how was the drive, not even a want some water. You've been in a car since noon. Just plates, a warning, and the implication that my mere existence was a liability. I stood in the hallway holding his good china, and I did not say a word. I've learned that words don't work in this house. Not mine anyway. But let me back up. Because to understand that dinner, you need to understand the phone call that started it all. 3 days earlier, Wednesday evening, I was sitting on the floor of the therapy gym at Riverside Community Hospital, peeling dinosaur stickers off my scrub pants. My last patient of the day, a 5-year-old named Marcus Webb with cerebral palsy, had just spent 45 minutes learning to grip a plastic spoon. He laughed twice during the session. That's not a small thing. That's the whole thing. My phone buzzed on the bench beside me. "Dad." I considered letting it ring. I really did. I sat there, sticker residue on my fingers, a tiny T-Rex half peeled off my knee, and I thought, I could just not. But then I thought about my mom, and I picked up. "Thea." "No hello." He doesn't do hellos. Hellos are for people with time to waste. "Hi, Dad. Daniel's bringing his girlfriend Saturday. I need you here by 4 to help set up." I closed my eyes. "Dad, it's a 4-hour drive. I have a patient until 2. Leave early." "I can't leave early. Marcus has a session." "This is important, Thea." I wanted to explain that Marcus was also important, that he was learning to feed himself for the first time in his life, and that canceling meant pushing his session a full week, which meant 7 more days of his mother spooning applesauce into his mouth while he cried because he wanted, more than almost anything, to do it himself. But I've had this conversation before. Different words, same outcome. "I'll be there," I said. "Good. The good plates are in a box in the garage. Pull them out and wash them." He hung up. Didn't ask about my day. Didn't ask about Marcus. Didn't ask about anything. I sat there in the empty gym, phone in my hand, a half-peeled dinosaur on my knee, and I thought about my mother. Marie Calloway died 3 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, fast and merciless, the kind that doesn't negotiate. The last thing she said to me, her hand thin as paper in mine, was, "Keep this family together, Thea. That's the only reason I still make this drive. Not for my father." For a promise I made to a woman who would be absolutely horrified by what her family has become. Now, my father, Robert Calloway. He coached varsity football at Jefferson High in Charlottesville for 30 years. Head coach, state semifinals twice. In our town, that meant something. Men bought him beers at the hardware store. Parents named their dogs after his playbook formations. A woman in our neighborhood, I am not making this up, named her golden retriever Blitz Package. Blitz for short. When Dad retired 5 years ago, the local paper ran a front-page photo. Coach Calloway, arms crossed, whistle around his neck, grinning like a man who had personally invented winning. Then it was over. No more Friday night lights. No more coach. Just Robert sitting in a recliner, scrolling through ESPN, waiting for someone to make him feel important again. That someone is my brother, Daniel. Daniel is 32, a regional sales rep for a medical equipment company. He's fine at it. He closes deals, hits quota, earns a decent living. But the way my father talks about him, you'd think Daniel personally negotiated the end of the Cold War. Here's the scoreboard, since my father always keeps score. My graduation from the DPT program, 3 years of graduate school, clinical rotations that had me sleeping in my car between shifts. My father arrived 40 minutes late, sat in the back row, and spent the ceremony on his phone. Afterward, he said, "So you're done with school now?" Good. 2 months later, Daniel signed his first regional account. Dad threw a backyard barbecue, invited the neighbors, and wore a proud dad apron he has never once put on for me. Last Thanksgiving, I cooked my mother's entire menu from memory. The cornbread, the sweet potato casserole, the turkey brine exactly the way she taught me. Nobody mentioned it. Then Daniel walked in with a $30 bottle of wine, and my father held it up like he'd just received the Stanley Cup. That's my boy. My father doesn't see me. He sees a pair of hands that remind him of my mother. So, Saturday morning. I made the 4-hour drive to Charlottesville, arrived at 4 on the dot, squeezed my Civic into the only remaining spot in the driveway because Daniel's truck was parked dead center like he'd claimed manifest destiny over the entire concrete surface. I grabbed my bag, walked inside. Dad pointed at the stairs without looking up from his beer display. Your room's open. Change and come help. I went upstairs, pushed open the door to my room, and stopped. My mother's bookshelf, the one she'd had since college, the one that held her collection of 23 hand-blown glass butterflies gathered from antique shops across Virginia over 15 years, was gone. In its place, a 65-inch flat screen mounted to the wall, a leather recliner, a tackle box. 3 fishing rods leaning in the corner like they owned the place. He was turning my childhood bedroom into a man cave. I went back downstairs. Dad? Where are Mom's butterflies? He didn't look up. I boxed up those knickknacks. They were collecting dust. Knickknacks. That's the word he used. For 23 years of my mother's joy. Where's the box? Garage somewhere. Yard sale next weekend. The yard sale. He was going to sell them. My mother's glass butterflies, sitting in a cardboard box between old golf clubs and a broken shop vac, tagged at $1 apiece. I opened my mouth. Then I heard Daniel laugh from the living room, easy and loud, and I swallowed whatever I was about to say and went to wash the good plates. Because that's what I do in this house. I wash the plates. The guests were arriving at 5:30, and none of us, not me, not Daniel, not my father, had any idea what was about to walk through that front door. The guests arrived at 5:30 like a small, well-meaning invasion. Grandma Margot came first, wheeled in by Aunt June, my mom's younger sister. Grandma is 82, sharp as a tack, hard of hearing, and she squeezed my hand at the door like she was checking I was still made of real material. Aunt June pulled me into a hug that lasted exactly 1 beat too long. The kind that says I know without anyone having to say anything at all. Then came the Hartwells. Bill and Donna, neighbors for 20 years, the couple who showed up with casseroles every single day for a month after Mom's funeral. Good people. The kind of people who actually deserve the good china. Dad arranged everyone in the living room like he was calling a pre-game huddle. He clapped Daniel on the shoulder and turned to the Hartwells with the energy of a man about to announce a championship. You all know my son, regional sales rep, just closed a deal with 3 hospital systems across the state. He grinned, rocking back on his heels. Chip off the old block. Then he glanced at me. I was standing by the dining table holding a stack of cloth napkins, which, for the record, I had just ironed. By hand. Without being asked. And this is Thea, Dad said. She volunteers at a hospital down in Richmond. Bill Hartwell tilted his head. Oh, like, reading to kids? My father nodded. Something like that. I did not correct him. I have corrected him 7 times in 3 years. Each time he responds the same way, like a man who has heard a fact and simply chosen not to install it. After a while, you stop swinging at a pitch you know he'll never throw straight. Aunt June caught my eye from across the room. Her lips were pressed together in the specific expression of a woman holding back an entire speech. Daniel was pouring wine for Dad. He heard every word. He knows I'm not a volunteer. He has walked through pediatric rehabilitation wings as part of his actual paying job. He poured the second glass and handed it to Dad without looking at me. Something like that, Dad said again, waving me toward the kitchen. Go check on the roast. I went to check on the roast. The kitchen smelled like rosemary and garlic and approximately 45 minutes of my own labor. I had been in there since I arrived, prepping the bruschetta, slicing bread, arranging everything on a platter Mom had bought at a craft fair in Savannah, Georgia, back when she and Dad took that anniversary trip and he complained about the humidity the entire time but kept the platter anyway. The platter has a small chip on the edge. I always hold it with the chip toward me so nobody sees. Daniel wandered in to grab a sparkling water from the fridge. I didn't turn around. You could have corrected him, I said. You know exactly what I do. He twisted the cap off and leaned against the counter with his arms crossed. For a second, he looked so much like Dad it was genuinely unsettling. Same posture, same angle of the jaw, same energy of a man who believes the room owes him something. Come on, Thea, don't start. Not tonight. I'm not starting anything. I'm asking you to say one true sentence about me in front of another human being. He shifted his weight. He's just proud of me. It's not about you. I let that land. It's not about you. In this house, it never is. Daniel, I said very calmly, the way I speak to children who are scared of the therapy equipment. You sell medical devices to rehabilitation departments. You have personally walked through PT gyms and shaken hands with therapists who do exactly what I do. You know what I do is not volunteering. He opened his mouth. The doorbell rang. Dad's voice boomed from the living room like a foghorn at a yacht club. That must be her! Thea, bring the appetizers! I looked at the bruschetta platter. I looked at Daniel. I looked at the doorway. Daniel shrugged. Let's just have a nice night, okay? I picked up the platter. Chip toward me, good side out. I straightened my shoulders. I walked toward the front of the house carrying a tray of food and a patience that was at that point running on fumes. The front door opened. She was tall, dark hair pulled into a low bun, olive green wrap dress, a bottle of wine in one hand, and a smile that reached all the way to her eyes. She looked like someone who laughs easily, tips generously, and remembers the names of baristas. Daniel stepped past me and wrapped his arm around her. Everyone, this is Clare. Dad crossed the room in 2 strides, hand already extended. Welcome, welcome. We've heard so much about you. Clare shook his hand warmly, said something gracious about the house, about the smell of dinner. She turned to Grandma Margot, bent down, introduced herself at exactly the right volume, loud enough for the hearing aids, gentle enough not to make it weird. She was good with people. You could tell immediately. Then she turned toward me. I was standing 3 feet away, holding the bruschetta platter, wearing my mom's old apron with the little flowers on the sleeve. I was aware that I looked exactly like what my father had just described me as the help. Claire's eyes found my face. Her smile dropped. Not rudely, not coldly. More like someone who just stepped off a curb they didn't see coming. Her lips parted. Her chin pulled back a fraction. The bottle of wine tilted slightly in her grip, and Daniel reached over to steady it without even looking. You okay, babe? She didn't answer him. She was staring at me. And I was staring back, because I knew this face. I knew it from the hallway outside Therapy Room 3 at Riverside. This woman sitting in a plastic chair every Tuesday and Thursday with a paperback in her lap. Sometimes reading, sometimes just staring at the wall. Sometimes crying so quietly the only sign was the wet spots on her jeans. The air between us went strange and still, the way it does right before something important happens. Like the 2 seconds before a child takes their first unassisted step, and everyone in the room is holding their breath at exactly the same time. Thea, she whispered. The room went completely silent. Dad frowned. Daniel looked between us like a man watching a tennis match he didn't buy tickets for. Thea. Dad's voice sharp and redirecting. Don't just stand there. Offer her something. I held out the bruschetta platter. Claire took a piece she would never eat. And nobody in that room, not my father, not my brother, not the Hartwells with their 20 years of casserole loyalty, had any idea what was about to happen at that dinner table. Dinner was served at 6:30, which meant I had spent approximately 2.5 hours in that kitchen and would be spending the next 40 minutes on my feet while everyone else sat down. Dad had arranged the seating with the strategic precision of a man who once drew plays on a whiteboard for a living. Daniel and Claire on his right, closest to the head of the table, the Hartwells in the middle, Aunt June and Grandma Margot to the left, and me, naturally, at the far end, positioned so conveniently close to the kitchen that I could practically refill the bread basket without standing up. The roast looked perfect. I had brined it with apple cider vinegar and fresh thyme, the exact method Mom used every Sunday for 26 years. Nobody commented on it. Nobody ever does. But if Daniel had stopped at a gas station on the way here and picked up a bag of dinner rolls, my father would have framed the receipt. Dad leaned back in his chair, one arm draped over Daniel's seat like they were posing for a sportswear catalog. So, Claire, this guy right here. He thumped Daniel on the shoulder hard enough that Daniel's water glass trembled. Regional sales rep. Just landed a 3-hospital contract last quarter. Tell her the numbers, Daniel. Daniel rattled off figures, units, margins, territories. The kind of numbers that sound impressive if you don't know what any of them mean, which, to be fair, most people at the table did not. Claire nodded politely, but her eyes kept drifting to me. I could feel it from across the table. The way you feel a draft from a window you can't see? Dad was still going. Chip off the old block. I used to tell my boys on the field and close the deal every play. Daniel took that to heart. He paused for effect, the way he always pauses, like he's waiting for a camera crew to get the angle right. Claire set her fork down. And what do you do, Thea? The table shifted. Not physically, but something in the air rearranged itself. It was the polite question every new guest asks. It was also the question my father has been answering on my behalf for 3 years. She helps out at a hospital, Dad said. Volunteers. Claire's eyebrows drew together. She looked at me. I gave her the small smile. The let it go smile. The smile I have been practicing since approximately 2019. What kind of volunteering? Claire asked. Her voice was perfectly pleasant. The way a kindergarten teacher's voice is perfectly pleasant, right before she explains to a 6-year-old why we don't eat paste. Dad waved his hand like he was shooing a fly. Daniel, tell Claire about the fishing trip with Uncle Roy, the one up in Lake Tahoe. And just like that, my entire career was replaced by a story about a largemouth bass. Under the table, Claire folded her napkin in her lap and pressed her fist against her thigh. Then she leaned toward me, barely an inch, barely noticeable, and said very quietly, I'd love to hear about your work later. I nodded. I didn't trust my voice right at that moment. Dad told 3 more stories about Daniel during the main course, the high school quarterback era, the all-state honorable mention, the homecoming touchdown junior year, which by this point in my life I have heard so many times I could recite it backwards in my sleep in Spanish while brining a turkey. Bill Hartwell turned to me between bites. Thea, did you play sports too? Dad laughed before I could open my mouth. Thea was more of a bookworm, nose always in something. What he did not mention was that I was also the 14-year-old who spent every Saturday morning volunteering at an adaptive sports camp 3 towns over because I wanted to understand why some kids couldn't throw a ball. But that doesn't fit the highlight reel, so it gets cut from the broadcast. Halfway through the main course, I stood to clear the appetizer plates. Nobody else moved. Daniel reached for his wine. Dad kept talking. The Hartwells smiled the smile of people who are enjoying themselves and have no idea they're watching a one-woman catering operation. Aunt June pushed her chair back. Honey, sit down. I'll help. Dad shook his head. June, you're a guest. Thea's got it. June looked at me. I looked at June. There was an entire conversation in that 4-second glance. 3 years of the same conversation, actually. She sat back down. Because that's what everyone does in Robert Calloway's house. You sit when he tells you to sit. I carried the plates to the kitchen. When I came back, Claire was watching me with an expression that was not pity, not sympathy, but something sharper. She was tracking the pattern. Who sat, who served, who got introduced, who got erased. She was doing the math, and she clearly did not like the answer she was getting. For the first time all evening, the thing I felt wasn't just exhaustion, it was embarrassment. The specific, awful embarrassment of being seen, really seen, by a stranger, while your own family looks straight through you. I sat back down. Claire didn't look away. Dessert was a store-bought pie from the bakery on 5th Street that Dad had picked up that afternoon and was now taking full credit for as though he had personally harvested the apples from a Virginia orchard at dawn. I brought the plates out. I poured the coffee. At one point, I counted and realized I had been on my feet more than I'd been in my chair, which is impressive at a dinner where I am technically a guest. Claire waited until I finally sat down again. She picked up her coffee, set it in the saucer with a small, deliberate click, squared her shoulders, and looked directly at me. Thea, I have to ask, which hospital do you work at exactly? The table went quiet with the specific silence of people who sense that something is about to happen, but aren't sure if they should look. Riverside Community, I said. In Richmond, Pediatric Rehab Wing. Claire's hand stopped mid-reach for the sugar bowl. Riverside, she said slowly. The Pediatric Rehab Wing. Yes. The silence thickened like gravy left on the stove too long. Dad looked at Claire the way a football coach looks at a player who just went off script. Faint frown, mild alarm, absolutely no play in the book for this situation. Claire turned to Daniel. Her voice was calm. Pleasantly, terrifyingly calm. You never told me your sister works at Riverside. Daniel shifted in his chair. I mentioned she works at a hospital. You said she volunteers. He picked up his fork, put it back down, picked up his napkin. There was nothing left to do with the napkin, so he folded it into a small square and set it beside his plate like a man who needed something to do with his hands. Claire looked at him for one long moment. Then she turned back to me, and something in her face broke open, recognition and grief and 2 years of gratitude colliding all at once behind her eyes. I need to tell all of you something, she said. Grandma Margot cupped her ear. What's that, dear? Bill Hartwell leaned back. Donna folded her hands. Aunt June gripped the edge of the table like she was bracing for weather. My father put down his fork. And for the first time all evening, he didn't have a story ready. Claire took a breath. She wasn't looking at my father anymore. She was looking at her hands folded on the table, and when she started talking, her voice had the careful steadiness of someone who has rehearsed grief enough times to speak through it without completely falling apart. 2 years ago, my little sister Lily was hit by a delivery truck while riding her bike, she said. She was 6 years old. Donna Hartwell covered her mouth. Bill set his coffee down. She fractured her pelvis. The impact compressed part of her lower spine. The doctors used words like significant impairment and long-term mobility challenges. Claire paused, swallowed. My parents sat in a hospital hallway in Nashville that smelled like floor wax and heard every one of those words. My mom stopped sleeping. My dad stopped talking. I was in my first year teaching second grade, and I drove down every Tuesday and Thursday to sit outside the therapy room while Lily screamed through her exercises. Dad arranged his face into the sympathetic expression he uses at funerals and parent-teacher conferences. That's terrible, Claire. Thank God she's all right. Claire looked up. She's all right because of one person. The table went still. I felt my pulse in my fingertips, pressing against the edge of my coffee cup. She hadn't said my name yet, hadn't connected the dots out loud. But I knew. And she knew I knew. I could see it in the way her jaw tightened when she looked at me, like she was physically holding back a wave. Daniel glanced at me, just a flicker, quick and confused, then back at Claire. Something was turning behind his eyes. He didn't have it yet, but he was close. The way you look when you're trying to remember where you parked the car, and the answer is right there, just out of reach. The doctors gave us numbers, Claire said. She gave us hope. She straightened in her chair. Her voice gained an edge, not anger, but conviction. The kind you hear in people who have been through something dark enough to sharpen their gratitude into something solid. There was a therapist at Riverside. She worked in the pediatric rehab wing. Every session, she got down on the floor with Lily, hands and knees on the mat, face to face, eye to eye. She never stood over her, never talked down to her. I stared at my plate. My throat tightened. Lily screamed sometimes, cried so hard she'd make herself sick, and this woman would just sit there, cross-legged on the floor, and wait. She'd say, I know it hurts. We'll try again when you're ready. Every single time. Donna Hartwell dabbed her eye with a napkin. Aunt June was gripping her water glass hard enough to leave fingerprints. She came in on her day off once, Claire continued. Lily had a bad night. Wouldn't eat, wouldn't talk, just lay in the hospital bed staring at the ceiling. This therapist drove in on a Saturday morning, sat on the edge of Lily's mat, and pulled out a butterfly sticker. My breath caught. I remembered that morning. I remembered that sticker. A monarch, orange and black, with glitter wings. I'd grabbed it from the prize bin on my way through the door. She told Lily that butterflies don't fly on their first day either, Claire said. That they have to wait, and stretch, and rest before their wings work. Claire's voice cracked on the last word. She pressed 2 fingers to her lips and held them there for a moment. Lily put that sticker on her wheelchair. She wouldn't let anyone take it off. She looked up. Lily walked into my classroom 3 months ago on her own 2 feet. The dining room went completely airless. Donna was openly crying. Bill had his arm around her. Grandma Margot was leaning so far forward in her wheelchair it was a mild structural concern. Claire stopped. She looked at me. Really looked. The way you look at someone when you've been carrying their kindness in your chest for 2 years, and suddenly they're sitting across from you holding a coffee cup in a house that does not deserve them. Thea, she said quietly, do you remember a little girl named Lily? Every head at the table turned to me. I set my cup down. My hand was steady. My voice almost wasn't. Lily Whitfield, I said. Red hair, freckles. Absolutely terrified of the parallel bars. She called them the scary bridges and refused to go near them for the first 3 sessions. Claire's eyes filled. Her chin trembled once, hard, and she pressed her lips together. That's my sister. The room went so quiet you could hear the refrigerator humming from the kitchen. Daniel's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Nothing came out. He looked like a man who had just been told the punchline of a joke he had been hearing for 2 years without realizing it was a joke at all. Aunt June made a sound that was half laugh, half sob, pressed both hands over her mouth, and gave up entirely on composure. Bill Hartwell looked at his wife. Donna looked at the ceiling. Grandma Margot leaned toward Aunt June and cupped her ear. What did she say? Aunt June turned to her, voice shaking. Claire's little sister was one of Thea's patients, Mom. Thea helped her walk again. Grandma Margot stared at me for a long moment, then her hand, thin, spotted, steady as anything, reached across the table and covered mine. She didn't say a word. She just held on. My father picked up his wine glass, put it down, picked it up again. He had the specific expression of a man who arrived at a game with the wrong playbook and is only now realizing it. Claire turned to face him. Mr. Calloway, she said, you told me Thea volunteers. Dad did what he always does when a play breaks down. He scrambled. Well, he cleared his throat, adjusted his collar. It's all the same, isn't it? Hospital work. Claire's voice stayed perfectly level. It's not the same, sir. Volunteering is giving your time. What Thea does is a licensed medical profession. Aunt June's hands were folded in front of her, but her knuckles were white. She has a doctorate, Richard. A doctor of physical therapy. She told you 3 years ago. Dad's neck went red. It started at the collar and climbed with impressive efficiency toward his ears. I know my daughter has a degree. Do you know what it's called? June asked. He did not answer. He reached for the wine bottle. It was empty. He put it back down and looked at it like it had personally betrayed him. Let's not make this a thing, he said, spreading both hands on the table in the universal gesture of a man who has just absolutely made it a thing. We're here to welcome Claire. I am welcomed, Mr. Calloway, Claire said pleasantly, and I'm grateful. But I'm sitting across from a woman who changed my family's life, and you've been introducing her as a volunteer. Aunt June's voice came in quiet and clear. She told you at Thanksgiving, Richard. You said that's nice and turned on the game. Dad opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Claire reached into her purse slowly, almost apologetically, and pulled out her phone. I didn't plan this, she said. I really didn't. But I want you to see something. She tapped the screen and held the phone up so the whole table could see. A video. Shaky handheld footage, a hospital hallway in Nashville, fluorescent lit, linoleum floor. And there was Lily. Red hair in a ponytail, bare feet on the cold tile, taking 1 step, 2, 3. At step 4, she stumbled. A pair of hands caught her. My hands. I was kneeling on the floor in scrubs, steadying her, saying something the microphone barely picked up. You've got it. You've got it. Lily stood again. Step 5, 6, 7. The hallway erupted, nurses clapping, a janitor stopping his cart, Lily's mom sobbing behind the camera, and me in the corner of the frame wiping my eyes with the back of my wrist, crying harder than anyone. The video ended. Claire lowered the phone. Dad was staring at the frozen last frame. My face caught mid-sob, kneeling on a hospital floor next to a child who had just done something the doctor said might never happen. He didn't say a word. "That's not volunteering, Mr. Calloway," Claire said simply. "That's saving a child's life." From the far end of the table, Grandma Margot's voice cut through the silence like a letter opener through an envelope. "Is that what you do, Thea?" She leaned forward. "Help children walk?" "Yes, Grandma," I said. "That's what I do." She squeezed my hand. "Your mother would be so proud." My father looked at the empty wine bottle for a long time. Then he looked at me. And for once in 30 years of dinners, Robert Calloway had absolutely nothing to say. The silence lasted long enough for the ice in Bill Hartwell's glass to crack and settle. Then my father pushed back from the table. The chair legs scraped against the hardwood floor with the specific sound of a man who has decided that the best defense is a very loud offense. He stood at the head of the table, palms flat on the wood, leaning forward in the posture he had used for 30 years of halftime speeches, shoulders square, chin up, voice about 40% louder than the room required. "I have always provided for this family," he said. "I coached boys into men for 30 years. I don't need a lecture at my own dinner table." Claire looked at him steadily. "No one is lecturing you, Mr. Calloway." He turned to me. And there it was. The redirect, the audible, the move he'd been running my entire life. "See what you've done." His finger jabbed the air between us. "I asked you one thing. Don't ruin this evening. One thing." The room braced. Aunt June gripped the table edge. Donna Hartwell's hand found Bill's knee. Grandma Margot, who had not fully followed the last 4 minutes of conversation, leaned toward Aunt June and whispered loudly enough for the whole room to hear, "Is he pointing at Thea again?" I looked at my father, at his finger, pointed at me across the same table where my mother served Thanksgiving dinner for 26 years. And I said what I should have said the moment he shoved those plates into my hands in the hallway. "I haven't said a word, Dad." His mouth opened. "I set your table. I cooked your food. I carried your plates. I cleared the dishes while everyone else had coffee." I kept my voice even. No tremor, no volume, just facts, laid out like patient notes. "I have not said one word all evening." The finger dropped. "And you still found a way to blame me." Silence. The full, floor-to-ceiling kind. Aunt June whispered, "She's right, Richard. She hasn't said a thing." Dad stood there, hands flat on the table, looking like a coach who just watched his star play collapse on the final drive. He had no audible left. For the first time in 30 years of dinners, Robert Calloway was out of material. It was Aunt June who moved next. She reached into her purse, the worn leather bag she'd carried since I was a teenager, and placed a small black moleskin notebook on the table. Elastic band, dog-eared corners, the kind of notebook that has clearly been opened and closed 10,000 times. "Your mother kept this," June said. Dad stared at it. "A notebook?" "She wrote down the names of every child Thea helped learn to walk." June's voice was soft but carried the full weight of 3 years of patience. Dates, milestones, little notes in the margins. She was going to give it to Thea on her 30th birthday. The room went very still. She didn't make it. June held the notebook out to me. I took it with both hands, the way you hold something fragile that has already survived more than it should. I opened the first page. Mom's handwriting. Small, slanted, the same cursive she used for grocery lists and birthday cards, and the note she tucked into my lunchbox the first day of grad school that I still have folded in my wallet. Lily W. First steps today. Thea called me crying. So proud of my girl. I could not read the next line. My vision blurred. I closed the notebook and pressed it against my chest and breathed. Dad was staring at the moleskin. His hand gripped the mantle behind him, knuckles white. He looked at it the way you look at a letter that arrived too late to matter and too important to throw away. Nobody spoke for a long time. long enough for the candles on the table to burn noticeably shorter. Then Dad did something I had not seen him do since my mother's funeral. He sat down, not in his chair at the head of the table, the throne he had occupied at every meal for 30 years. He sat on the ottoman beside the recliner in the corner of the room, lower to the ground, like a man whose legs made the decision before he did. "I didn't know she kept a notebook," he said. His voice was stripped down to something I barely recognized, something without the coach in it. Aunt June looked at him without flinching. "You didn't know a lot of things, Richard, because you didn't ask." He rubbed his face with both hands. When they came down, his eyes were red. Not crying, not quite. Just a man looking at the distance between who he thought he was and who he actually turned out to be, and realizing the measurement was in years. He looked at me, opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I don't know what to say. Part of me, the part that had driven 4 hours and brined a turkey and held a chipped platter with the damaged side facing in, wanted to help him. Wanted to hand him the right words the way I hand Marcus his exercises. Gently, patiently, one step at a time. But that was not my job tonight. "You don't have to say anything tonight, Dad." I looked at him. Really looked. Past the coach posture, past the bluster, at the 61-year-old man who lost his wife and his identity in the same 3 years and never learned how to grieve either one. "But I need you to hear this." I held the notebook against my ribs. "I won't come back to a house where I'm the staff." He nodded, not agreement exactly, more like surrender. Or the kind of nod you give when someone tells you something you cannot argue with and cannot fix, and the only honest response is to stop pretending you have an answer. From across the room, Grandma Margot's voice. Thin, steady, completely unbothered by the emotional devastation she was witnessing. Good girl. 2 words, the same 2 words she had used when I finished my vegetables, when I tied my shoes by myself, when I graduated from every school my father forgot to celebrate. Daniel, who had been sitting on the couch with his elbows on his knees and the expression of a man watching his own house burn down in slow motion, finally looked up. Clare was watching him. Not accusingly, not dramatically. The way a second-grade teacher watches a student who knows the answer and keeps pretending he doesn't. "You knew," she said. Not a question. Daniel exhaled through his nose. "I know. I should have." "You sell equipment to rehab departments, Daniel. You have walked through those gyms. You know exactly what she does." "I didn't think it mattered that—" "It mattered every single time," I said. He looked at the carpet, at the oil stain on the garage floor he couldn't see from here but was definitely picturing. "I'm sorry, Thea." "I know you are," I said. "Now prove it." I stood up. Not to storm out. Not to make an exit worthy of a standing ovation, although frankly I had earned one. I walked to the kitchen and started clearing the dessert plates the way I always do, because some habits take longer to break than one dinner. Clare followed me in. "I'll help," she said. "You're a guest. So are you." She picked up a stack of plates and set them by the sink. "That's kind of the whole point." I laughed. The first real laugh of the entire evening, the kind that loosens something in your chest that has been clenched for hours. We stood at the sink together, and outside the kitchen window the Virginia night was wide and dark and full of crickets, and for the first time since I pulled into that driveway and squeezed my Civic against the mailbox, I did not feel like the help. I felt like someone who had finally, at the age of 29, decided to hold the platter with the chip facing out. I found the box in the garage exactly where Dad said it would be, wedged between a broken shop vac and a set of golf clubs nobody had touched since the second Bush administration. Sharpie on the side read, "Misc. Yard sale in my father's handwriting, which is the most heartbreaking use of a Sharpie I have ever personally witnessed." I pulled the flaps open. 23 glass butterflies, wrapped in newspaper, packed tight. I lifted one out, a blue Morpho, hand-blown the size of my palm. Mom found it at an antique shop in Savannah, Georgia, the summer I turned 12. She held it up to the shop window and said, "Look, Thea, even glass can fly if the light hits it right." I checked each one, all intact, all present and accounted for. Claire appeared in the garage doorway. Need help? I've got it. I paused. But thank you. She picked up the other end of the box anyway, because Claire Whitfield is the kind of person who helps whether you ask her to or not, which explained a great deal about how she ended up with my brother. We carried the box to my car without speaking. We didn't need to. Daniel was waiting in the hallway when I came back inside, which I will admit was not what I expected. He had his hands in his pockets and the look of a man who had spent the last 20 minutes having a very uncomfortable conversation with himself. Thea, don't leave like this. I'm not leaving like anything, Daniel. I'm leaving with Mom's things that Dad was about to sell at a yard sale for $1 a piece next to a broken shop vac. He winced like I'd pressed directly on a bruise. We stood in the hallway under the same ceiling fan that had been wobbling slightly since 1987. Daniel rocked back on his heels, looked at the floor, looked at me. I should have said something, I know that. You should have, I said, but you chose easy every single time. He's our dad, Thea. He doesn't know how to... He doesn't know because nobody makes him learn, including you. The words landed. I saw them hit. The slight drop of his chin, the way his shoulders pulled in a fraction of an inch. You walk into rehab departments every week, Daniel. You shake hands with therapists who do exactly what I do. You come home and let Dad tell the neighbors I hand out juice boxes to sick children. He rubbed the back of his neck. His eyes were red, not from crying, from the specific exhaustion of looking at something you spent years carefully not looking at. I love you, I said. I mean that plainly, the way I tell my patients the truth about their recovery. But I won't pretend anymore. If you want a real relationship with me, it starts with you saying my actual job title out loud in front of him. That's it. That's the whole ask. He nodded slowly. I'm sorry, Thea. I know. Prove it. I stepped forward and hugged him. Quick and tight. The kind that says, I mean this, and I'm also leaving now. He hugged back harder than I expected, his chin resting on top of my head for exactly 1 second, the way it used to when we were kids. And he was tall, and I was small, and neither of us knew that growing up would mean growing this far apart. I let go. I walked to my car. Claire followed me out to the driveway. The porch light threw a yellow circle across the gravel, and beyond it, the Tennessee border night was wide and dark and full of crickets that had absolutely no idea what had just happened inside that house. Lily asks about you, Claire said. She calls you the butterfly lady. I laughed. The real kind, the kind that comes from somewhere below your sternum. She told her whole second-grade class about you during show and tell, Claire continued. Stood up with her crutches and said, this lady taught me how to be brave and she smells like hand sanitizer and she has the best stickers. My eyes stung. I looked at the stars over Charlottesville and blinked hard. You changed my sister's life, Thea. Claire's voice was steady but warm. I just needed you to know that someone sees what you do. She stepped forward and hugged me. Not the quick kind. The kind where you press your cheek against someone's shoulder and hold on, because you both know this moment is a hinge, the before and after of something that actually mattered. When she pulled back, she said, I'm going to have a very long talk with Daniel tonight. Go easy on him. Absolutely not, she said cheerfully, and went back inside. I got in the car. The box of butterflies was buckled into the back seat because I do not trust the curves on Route 29. In the rearview mirror, 23 small fires caught the dome light. I drove 4 hours home in the dark. No radio, just the hum of tires on asphalt and the occasional rattle of newspaper-wrapped glass reminding me what I was carrying. Somewhere outside Ashland, I reached over and opened the moleskin on the passenger seat. One hand on the wheel, one on the page. I flipped to the last entry. Aiden M. learning to hold a spoon. Thea says he laughed today. January 14th, 3 weeks before she died. She was in a hospital bed in Richmond with a morphine drip and a body that was failing her organ by organ, and she was still writing in this notebook, still keeping track, still paying attention. I closed it and pressed it against my chest and drove. When I got home, I carried the butterflies inside first, set them on the windowsill one by one, spaced the way Mom used to space them. The streetlight caught the glass, and for a moment, the whole room filled with fractured color. 23 small lights scattered across the ceiling like something that had been waiting a long time to get back where it belonged. 3 days later, Daniel called. His voice sounded different. Stripped of the sales rep polish, like a man who had been awake too long thinking about things he'd spent years not thinking about. Claire and I talked, he said. A lot, I gathered. I told Dad. I used the exact words, doctor of physical therapy. What did he say? Daniel exhaled. I know. But the way he said it, like he was hearing it for the first time and trying very hard to pretend he wasn't. That sounds exactly like him. I also told him the yard sale is off. Mom's things stay. My grip tightened on the phone. Thank you. Claire said something I can't stop hearing. He paused. If you can't stand up for your own sister, you can't stand up for anyone. I closed my eyes. In the gym behind me, Priya was counting ankle exercises in her patient, steady voice. It's a start, Daniel. I know it's not enough. No, but it's a start. 6 weeks later. My phone rang at 7 in the morning. I was brushing my teeth. Dad. I rinsed, picked up. Thea. His voice was morning rough in a way that suggested he had also been awake for a while. Garrett told me you're not coming for the 4th. That's right. A long pause. The kitchen clock ticking in the background, the one with the rooster on the face that Mom bought at a flea market in Memphis, and Dad pretended to hate for 15 years. Is there anything I can do? 5 words from a man who had spent 30 years giving orders instead of asking questions. Yes, I said. Next time you introduce me, say, this is my daughter Thea. She's a pediatric rehabilitation specialist. That's it. That's all I've ever asked. The clock ticked. 3 beats. 4. I can do that. Then I'll think about coming. He cleared his throat, the sound a man makes when he's swallowing something that isn't food. Your mother's things, he said. I moved them back to the shelf. My breath caught. The blue one, he continued and stopped. Started again. The blue butterfly, the one from Savannah. It was her favorite. He knew. He had always known. He had just never once said it out loud. It's mine too, I said. I know. The call ended. Not warm, not cold. Just honest. 4 months after the dinner that changed everything, I made the drive again. Garrett's truck was parked to one side, leaving room for me. A small thing, a deliberate one. Dad opened the door before I knocked. He held out a glass of water. Long drive, he said. I took it. Later, I heard his voice carry from the living room into the hallway. You remember my daughter Thea? A pause. She's a pediatric rehabilitation specialist. 2 words he had never once said before. No trophy, no halftime speech. Just a 61-year-old man standing in his living room saying something true about his daughter. On the shelf behind him, the glass butterflies caught the lamplight. I don't know if my father will ever fully change. People don't rewrite 30 years of habit because of one dinner and a moleskin notebook and a 2nd-grade teacher from Nashville who decided to tell the truth at someone else's dining room table. But I know this. I'm not waiting anymore. I used to think being seen meant being praised. That if my father could just once say the right words in the right order, something inside me would finally click into place. I carried that belief for 29 years. It weighed more than any box of glass butterflies. The children I work with, they see me every day. Not as a daughter, not as a volunteer, as the person who shows up when it hurts and stays until it doesn't. Marcus held a spoon last week. His mother stood in the doorway and sobbed. Oliver said his first full sentence in therapy on a Tuesday morning. Can we do it again? 4 words. Better than any speech. A month after Thanksgiving, I found a pink envelope in my work mailbox. Butterfly sticker sealing the flap. Inside, a card made from folded construction paper. 2 crayon figures holding hands on a bridge drawn as 2 long lines across the page. Above them, a butterfly with orange glitter wings. Dear Butterfly Lady, I ran in gym class today. I didn't fall. My teacher said I was fast. I don't know if I'm fast, but I didn't fall. And that's the same thing. Thank you for teaching me how to be brave. Love, Lily. I pinned it above my desk, right next to the framed photo of Mom laughing on a beach in Hilton Head, South Carolina, feet in the sand, completely unbothered. The two of them side by side. The woman who always saw me, and the child who proved that the work was real. I'm Thea Calloway. I help children walk, and I finally learned to walk away from the table where I was invisible.